There is a moment in every life when you realize that the world does not see the battles happening inside you. People see your face. They see your choices. They see your silence. But they never see the weight you carry. And this weight, it sits on the mind like a shadow you cannot outrun. Before we go deeper, listen carefully, because the next few seconds hold the power to shift something inside you. Forgiving yourself is not weakness. It is a rebellion. A quiet, powerful rebellion against the voice that tells you you're not enough. And if you stay with this video till the end, you will understand something that most people never discover. The freedom you've been searching for has been waiting inside you the entire time. We carry so much without ever speaking about it. Old decisions that haunt us. Moments where we acted from fear instead of strength. Words we wish we never said. Paths we wish we never walked. And the hardest part is not the memory itself, but the way our mind refuses to let it go. The human brain is wired to protect us. It replays mistakes to prevent us from repeating them. But somewhere along the way, that protection becomes a prison. A quiet self, punishment that drains hope from our future. You don't need to pretend you're strong. You don't need to pretend you're untouched. What you feel is real. What you regret is real. And the pressure you carry is heavier than most people know. But here is the truth most people never hear directly. The weight you feel does not mean you are broken. It means you care. It means you have a heart that still wants to do better, even after everything. Guilt is not the enemy. Shame is not the enemy. They only become dangerous when you start believing that your mistakes define your worth. But your mistakes are events, not your identity. You survived them. You grew through them. And somewhere deep inside, a part of you is still trying to rise above them. That part of you is the reason you're listening right now. Many people think self-forgiveness is about letting yourself off the hook. But that's not true. Self-forgiveness is about refusing to let a past moment steal every future moment. You cannot change what has happened, but you can change the story you tell yourself about it. And that shift in story changes everything. Think about how you treat the people you care about. When they fall short, you understand. When they struggle, you listen. When they make mistakes, you remind them that one failure doesn't erase who they are. But when it comes to yourself, the psychology is completely different. You become harsher, colder, less forgiving. You hold yourself to a standard you wouldn't require from anyone else. And you judge yourself with a level of cruelty you would never use on another human being. This is where the real healing begins. Not by escaping from your past, but by looking at yourself with the same compassion you already carry for others. You are not the villain your mind has made you out to be. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. You are a human being who was trying to navigate life with the tools and awareness you had at the time. And as you hear these words, something inside you already knows they're true. Because forgiveness isn't something we learn. It's something we remember. It's part of our nature. What makes it difficult is the belief that we don't deserve it. But ask yourself this: how long will you let the past control you? How long will you let an old version of you decide the limits of the person you can become now? You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to rise. You are allowed to release the version of you that didn't know better. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not pretending. It is not erasing the past. Forgiveness is choosing not to let the pain of yesterday steal the strength of today. It is choosing to open the door that you locked from the inside. It is choosing to breathe again. And the weight you carry, it is not permanent. It is not your identity. It is just a chapter, and chapters end. The moment you decide to forgive yourself, the shape of your life changes. Your thoughts soften. Your heart loosens its grip. Your path becomes lighter. Stay till the end of this video, because what you're about to learn next is the missing piece. The piece that explains why holding on hurts more than letting go. And once you understand it, the weight you carry will finally begin to lift. Your mind remembers pain far more sharply than it remembers peace. That is why forgiving yourself feels almost impossible. The moment you try to let go, the mind pulls you back with old images, old words, and old stories. It whispers that you should have known better. It reminds you of every moment you wish you could rewrite. And this constant replay is not because you are weak. It is because the human brain is designed to focus on mistakes as a way to survive. But survival mode is not a place where healing can happen. When you look at your past, you often look at it with today's awareness. You judge an old version of yourself with the wisdom you gained later. This creates a psychological trap, one where you cannot win. Because no matter how much you grow, your mind will always tell you that you should have grown sooner. That's why the guilt feels endless. Not because you deserve punishment, but because you are using the wrong lens to view what happened. Another reason forgiveness feels unreachable is the inner critic. That quiet voice that turns every mistake into a final verdict. It does not speak with truth. It speaks with fear. Fear of repeating the past. Fear of being judged. Fear of not being enough. And fear, when left unchallenged, becomes the loudest voice in your life. It convinces you that holding on to pain is the only way to stay in control. But pain is not control. Pain is just a loop. You are not your inner critic. You are the one listening to it. And once you see that difference, you begin to take your power back. Because the moment you separate your identity from that voice, you realize it has been lying to you for years. Forgiveness feels impossible because you've never been taught how to give yourself grace. You've learned how to be responsible. You've learned how to be strong. You've learned how to endure. But you were never shown how to treat yourself with understanding. And without understanding, forgiveness has nowhere to grow. Yet something inside you already knows that the weight you carry can shift. You felt it in the last section. You feel it now. Forgiveness seems impossible until the moment you realize it's not about erasing the past. It's about releasing the version of you that has been trapped inside it. You carry so much pressure because somewhere along the way, you were taught that mistakes are signs of failure, that imperfection means you are not worthy, that every wrong choice becomes a permanent stamp on your character. This belief does not come from truth. It comes from a world obsessed with perfection, a world that praises the flawless and hides the broken. And you absorb that message without even realizing it. The mind starts forming impossible standards long before you understand what they mean. You begin to chase an image of yourself that never existed, an ideal version who never slips, never hesitates, never chooses wrongly. And when reality doesn't match that illusion, the inner critic becomes louder. It says you should be better. It says you should be stronger. It says you should be further than you are. But this is the lie that keeps you chained. Perfectionism is not the desire to grow. It is the fear of being seen as flawed. And when you live in that fear, every mistake becomes a threat. Every regret becomes a wound that refuses to heal. This is why forgiving yourself feels so hard. Not because your mistakes are unforgivable, but because you have been conditioned to believe that you are supposed to be untouched by them. But no one is untouched. No one is perfect. Even the strongest people you admire carry stories they never tell. They have stumbled. They have broken down. They have questioned themselves. They just don't show it. And you compare your hidden wounds to their polished surface. This comparison steals your peace without mercy. The truth is simple but powerful. Being human means learning through imperfection. Growth is born from struggle. Wisdom is shaped by error. Strength is built from the moments that tested you. Your past did not break you. It carved you. It shaped the depth of your understanding. It formed the compassion you now carry. You are not meant to be perfect. You are meant to be real. And real beings make real mistakes. Once you accept this, the weight of guilt begins to loosen. You stop fighting your past and start learning from it. You stop fearing your flaws and start embracing the humanity in them. Forgiveness becomes possible the moment you stop demanding perfection from yourself, because only then can you see your mistakes for what they truly are, as stepping stones, not life sentences. When you release the idea of perfection, something important becomes clear. The version of you who made those mistakes was not the same person you are now. That past self was shaped by different fears, different influences, different levels of awareness. Yet you judge them with the mind you have today. This is why guilt feels so heavy. You are punishing an earlier version of yourself for not knowing what you know now. If you look closely, you will see that every choice you made came from the level of understanding you had at that moment. You reacted based on what you felt, what you believed, and what you feared. You didn't choose from clarity. You chose from survival. And survival decisions rarely look wise when viewed from a place of growth. The brain evolves, awareness expands, insight grows. You are constantly becoming someone new. But the mind sometimes forgets this, and it holds tightly to moments that no longer represent who you are. The mistake stays frozen, even though you have already changed. This is where understanding becomes essential. You don't need to excuse your past, but you must understand it. Without understanding, forgiveness feels impossible. With understanding, it becomes natural. Think about how you view others. When someone explains the pressure they were under or the confusion they felt, you find compassion. You soften. You understand. But you rarely offer yourself that same softness. You forget that the person you were back then didn't have the strength you've built now. They didn't have the lessons you've learned since. They were trying, even if the outcome wasn't perfect. Self-forgiveness begins when you stop treating your past self as an enemy. They were simply a version of you who needed guidance, not punishment. A version who was doing the best they could with the tools they had. And the fact that you feel regret now is proof that you've grown. It means the lesson worked. It means you became wiser. Regret is not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you've evolved. Understanding your past self is not weakness. It is maturity. It is the moment you stop fighting old shadows and begin recognizing how far you've come. When you see your past through the lens of growth, the grip of guilt begins to loosen, and forgiveness becomes a natural step forward. Once you begin to understand your past self, a new kind of strength becomes available to you. The strength to take responsibility without drowning in shame. Responsibility is often misunderstood. Many people think it means blaming yourself, carrying the weight alone, or punishing yourself endlessly. But responsibility is none of those things. Responsibility is ownership, and ownership is power. When you take responsibility, you're not saying, I should have been perfect. You're saying, I accept what happened, and I choose to grow from it. This simple shift changes everything. It turns you from a victim of your past into the author of your future. It gives you control over what happens next. Responsibility empowers you to rise instead of collapse. Most people fear responsibility because they think it confirms their worst beliefs about themselves. But the truth is the opposite. When you face what happened without excuses, you prove to yourself that you are stronger than the mistake. You show that the moment didn't define you. You defined it by how you responded afterward. Taking responsibility also breaks the cycle of self-punishment. When you avoid responsibility, the mind keeps replaying the past, searching for answers, trying to rewrite the moment. This creates mental exhaustion. But when you accept what happened, the loop begins to fade. The mind stops fighting the memory because you are no longer resisting it. You are integrating it. This is where healing begins to deepen. Responsibility is not about holding the pain tighter. It's about meeting the truth without fear. It's about taking back the power you once gave away to regret. And once you take that power back, forgiveness becomes a choice, not a struggle. You don't have to carry your past forever. You don't have to deny it, avoid it, or hide from it. You simply have to own it. Owning it frees you. It shows you that growth is always possible, even from moments you wish never happened. Responsibility is not a burden. It's a doorway into the life you can create from this moment forward. Section 6C. Letting go of internal punishment. Taking responsibility opens the door to healing, but stepping through that door requires something deeper. Letting go of the punishment you've been giving yourself. Many people don't even realize how often they punish themselves internally. It becomes a habit, a quiet automatic loop where the mind replays mistakes, criticizes every decision, and convinces you that you must suffer to make things right. But suffering has never been a path to transformation. It only drains the strength you need to grow. Internal punishment feels familiar because it gives an illusion of control. When you keep blaming yourself, it feels like you're doing something. It feels like you're paying a debt. But this is a psychological trap. Punishment doesn't bring closure. It doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't make you wiser. It only keeps you tied to a moment that is already gone. The mind tends to hold on to pain because pain is a strong signal. It demands attention. And when you don't know how to resolve it, you replay it, thinking the answer will appear if you suffer long enough. But answers don't come from pain. They come from clarity. And clarity only appears when you stop attacking yourself. Letting go does not mean you forget what you learned. It does not mean you deny what happened. It simply means you stop reliving it. You stop using your own mind as a weapon against yourself. You stop believing that hurting inside will somehow balance the past. Imagine speaking to someone you deeply care about. Would you want them to carry a punishment that lasts forever? Would you want them to feel pain every single day for something they cannot change? If not, then why do you allow it for yourself? This question alone reveals how unfair you've been to your own heart. Letting go is an act of courage. It means choosing healing over suffering. It means allowing your mind to rest. It means trusting that you have learned enough from the pain to move forward without carrying it like a burden. You deserve peace. not because you are perfect, but because your growth proves that you have changed. And the moment you stop punishing yourself internally, forgiveness finally has space to breathe. When you finally stop punishing yourself, you create the silence needed to hear something far more important, the voice inside you. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of guilt, the deeper voice. The voice you've ignored for years because the noise of self-criticism was always louder. Rewriting your inner voice is the heart of self-forgiveness, because every belief you hold about yourself begins from the way you speak to yourself. Most people grow up absorbing criticism more easily than encouragement. The brain naturally remembers negative words more strongly because they feel like warnings. Over time, those warnings become your default thinking. You start talking to yourself in a way you would never speak to another human being. You call yourself names. You talk yourself out of opportunities. You convince yourself that you're undeserving. This voice shapes your identity without you even noticing. But identity is not fixed. It is shaped by repeated words, repeated thoughts, repeated beliefs. And the moment you decide to shift the way you speak to yourself, your entire inner world begins to change. You are not lying to yourself by being kind. You are revealing a truth that the inner critic has buried for years. The truth that you are capable, resilient, and still growing. Rewriting your inner voice does not happen in one moment. It happens through small, consistent choices. It happens when you interrupt a harsh thought and replace it with something constructive. It happens when you give yourself credit for progress instead of attacking yourself for imperfection. It happens when you whisper to yourself the words you once needed to hear from others. This new voice becomes your foundation, a foundation built on understanding instead of judgment, strength instead of fear, growth instead of regret. And as this voice grows stronger, forgiveness becomes natural. It becomes less about letting go of the past and more about building a future where you are not at war with your own mind. When your inner voice shifts, your entire life shifts. Confidence rises, clarity returns. You start acting from a place of worth, not woundedness, and the world around you begins to reflect the change happening within you. As your inner voice becomes softer and wiser, another realization begins to rise. The world has also left its marks on you. The pain you carry is not only from your own choices. Some of it comes from the actions, words, and failures of others. And as long as you hold on to that hurt, it occupies the same space in your heart that self-forgiveness needs to grow. Forgiving yourself becomes easier when you stop carrying the weight of what the world has done to you. Resentment is a silent poison. It convinces you that holding on protects you. It convinces you that anger keeps you safe. But resentment never protects. It only drains. It keeps you tied to experiences you no longer want to remember. It keeps the wound open long after the moment has passed. And emotionally, it traps you in the same cycle that self-blame does. Forgiving the world doesn't mean the world was right. It doesn't mean the people who hurt you deserve a free pass. Forgiveness is not approval. It is release. Release from the tension your body holds. Release from the stories your mind repeats. Release from the heaviness you've carried for far too long. Forgiveness is not a gift to others. It is a gift to yourself. Every person you've encountered carried their own pain, their own fears, their own confusion. Some hurt you unintentionally. Some hurt you because they were hurting, and some simply didn't know better. Understanding this doesn't erase the impact, but it makes it easier to loosen the emotional grip. You cannot rewrite the actions of others. You cannot go back and change the way someone treated you. But you can choose not to let their actions shape who you are becoming. You can choose not to let bitterness build a home inside you, because that bitterness blocks the peace you are trying to create within yourself. Forgiving the world is a declaration that your heart will no longer be controlled by what happened. It is choosing strength over bitterness, clarity over chaos, and freedom over attachment to pain. When you release what others have done, the path toward forgiving yourself becomes clearer, lighter, and infinitely more possible. When you begin to forgive the world, it becomes clear that every person is imperfect. Every person carries unseen wounds, fears, and limitations. No one acts purely from clarity or wisdom. Even those who seem strong, confident, or successful have hidden struggles. The realization that everyone is flawed changes the way you view the actions of others and the way you view yourself. Holding on to anger or resentment often comes from expecting people to be better than they are. But expecting perfection from others is as unfair as expecting it from yourself. When someone hurts you, it is often a reflection of their own pain, not a measure of your worth. Understanding this is not an excuse for bad behavior. It is a tool for freedom. It helps you release the emotional chains that bind you to the past. Empathy is born from seeing human flaws clearly. When you understand that mistakes, selfishness, and cruelty are part of the human condition, you stop personalizing every hurt. You see that the world acts through its own chaos and confusion. The anger that once burned inside begins to cool. Bitterness slowly loses its power, and in that space, forgiveness can grow. This understanding also strengthens self-compassion. When you see how limited people are, you begin to see that you too were limited at times. You were learning, growing, and navigating the world with the awareness you had. Your failures and missteps were never signs of being unworthy. They were signs of being human. The mind often resists this perspective because it feels safer to assign blame. Blame gives an illusion of control, as if identifying a villain will make the pain disappear. But in truth, blame keeps the wound alive. Acceptance and understanding heal it. When you accept human flaws, yours and others, you stop being a prisoner of judgment. Understanding human flaws is not resignation. It is liberation. It allows you to release resentment and self-punishment simultaneously. It allows you to forgive without condoning. It allows you to move forward with clarity, compassion, and a lighter heart. The world may never be perfect, and people may never be flawless, but your freedom does not depend on them. It depends on the understanding and forgiveness you cultivate within yourself. Closure is something the mind craves. It tells you that if you just understand, if you just hear the right words, if you just get an apology, then everything will finally feel complete. But closure is often an illusion. Many moments in life never resolve the way you hope. People never explain, situations never change, and the answers you seek may never come. Holding on to the need for closure keeps your heart tied to the past, trapped in a cycle of waiting that never ends. When you release the need for closure, you stop giving power to what happened. You stop letting someone else's actions dictate your peace. Forgiveness becomes a choice rather than a condition. It no longer depends on an apology, a recognition, or a change from someone else. It depends entirely on you. And the moment you claim that power, you step out of the prison of expectation. The mind resists letting go because it fears uncertainty. It fears that without closure, pain will remain. But holding on does not guarantee relief. It guarantees more suffering. You have already lived through the event. You have already felt the hurt. Continuing to replay it only deepens the wound. True peace begins when you accept that some questions will remain unanswered. And that is okay. Releasing the need for closure also means accepting imperfection in life. People are flawed. Situations are unpredictable. You cannot control the past, and you cannot control how others respond. You can only control your own heart. When you focus on your own growth, your own healing, and your own understanding, you reclaim the freedom that was lost in the attachment to answers that may never come. Forgiveness without closure is a radical act. It says that you will not let the unfinished business of the past hold your future hostage. It says that your peace is more important than being right, more important than explanations, more important than validation. It is a powerful choice that lightens the soul and clears space for life to move forward. The moment you let go of the need for closure, you finally step into freedom. You stop carrying the invisible chains of expectation. You stop waiting for the world to change and begin changing yourself. And in that release, you discover a calm strength that cannot be taken from you. Forgiveness, both for yourself and for the world, is not a single act. It is a decision, a conscious choice to stop carrying the weight of yesterday and to step into a life shaped by peace, clarity, and purpose. When you make this choice, you are no longer bound by guilt, anger, or resentment. You are no longer a prisoner of mistakes, your own or those of others. You are free to move forward with intention, strength, and awareness. Choosing a new beginning means looking at yourself with fresh eyes. You are no longer the person defined by regret. You are the person who survived, learned, and grew. You are the one who refused to let pain dictate the rest of your life. Every misstep, every hurt, every disappointment has shaped the resilience you now carry. This resilience is your foundation, and on it, you can build a life of authenticity and peace. A new beginning also means embracing your freedom to choose how you respond to life. Life will continue to challenge you. People will continue to fall short. Situations will remain imperfect. But you now understand that your peace is not tied to external events. Your strength comes from within. By choosing forgiveness, you reclaim control over your emotions, your thoughts, and your story. You are no longer defined by what happened. You are defined by how you rise from it. This choice is empowering because it honors your humanity. It acknowledges that mistakes are inevitable, that hurt is unavoidable, and that imperfection is natural. And it also acknowledges that you have the power to decide how much these moments will shape your future. When you forgive, you are not ignoring the past. You are transforming it into a source of wisdom and growth. You are converting pain into clarity, regret into understanding, and wounds into lessons. A new beginning is a commitment to living with intention, to treating yourself with compassion, to treating the world with understanding, to walking forward without the weight of old chains. Every breath becomes lighter. Every step becomes stronger. Every choice becomes aligned with the life you deserve. Forgiveness is the gateway, and courage is the path. When you step through, you step into the truest version of yourself, a version that is free, whole, and capable of embracing every moment with presence and strength.